Everybody's got a price, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a pod, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a price.
What's up, everybody? It's Marcus D'Angelo, and we're back for another episode of Everybody's Got a Pod. And of course, I'm joined by the $1 million man himself, the Hall of Famer, Ted DiBiase. Dad, what's going on, my friend?
Not a whole lot. I feel like $1 million today.
I am glad to hear it, despite the cold down there.
I'm healthy and what have you. It's except they're the garbage pickup in our neighborhood comes every Tuesday and Friday.
Yeah.
Yesterday was a beautiful day here, and so I had on a pair of shorts and a t-shirt. I have a t-shirt on now, and I was gonna take the garbage to the curb, and oh my gosh, I walked outside and it's freezing cold here. It's like only 40 or 50 degrees. So
that is like a summer breeze compared to what I'm dealing with here in Pittsburgh. It is very cold up here, and I've got to take it today as we're recording. It's Halloween, so I've got to take my little one trick-or-treating. Are you taking the grandkids out?
What our grandkids are doing is, and I think this is pretty cool, they are going to one of the my daughter-in-law, well, Leah was my daughter-in-law, and Leah had been married to Brett. They divorced, but Leah's sister and her husband have a big party, and they invite all these kids, and they have a big party at their house, do the whole thing, Halloween and ghouls and goblins and what have you. And I think so, I think my wife's going to go to the big Halloween party, and I said, "We'll have a good time." Yeah. I'll stay here, and I will answer the door for the trick-or-treaters.
There you go. I think you got the better end of that deal, Ted. That sounds nice. Now, whenever you're doing the trick-or-treating in your neighborhood and you're handing out candy to kids, I mean, you're back on WWE Network now, and people get to kind of refresh and re-see you now, and new generations of kids get to see the $1 million man. Does anybody ever say, hey, you look kind of familiar?
It happens to me a lot, and what is surprising to me, and it happened just recently that somebody came up and he says, "Excuse me, I don't mean to barge in or bother you." I said, "But I think I know who you are." I said, "Are you Ted DiBiase?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And he says, "I've been a big fan." And I'm looking at you, and this guy's like maybe 25 or something. And I said, "How do you know me? I mean, you weren't even alive when I was wrestling." And he said, "Well, he's got the network."
Yep.
And if you got the network, apparently you can watch. I mean, I knew that Vince did this years ago. He bought up all, like anything in any territory that was on tape, he bought it all. Yep. He owns all of wrestling now. There's no it's kind of like all the territory stuff, that was like a lot of times that stuff would be taped, and then the show might be taped over, because they use the same tape or something. Right. I don't know, but he's got it all.
I mean, nobody had the foresight back then to think of streaming, certainly not, but even the foresight of saying, hey, it's valuable to have this video library in case fans want to go back and revisit it. I can monetize it, maybe even turn it into VHSs back in the day. Like, nobody really had that vision or foresight, but Vince McMahon apparently did, because like you said, he wound up scooping up pretty much everything from the territories, I think, except from for the Memphis stuff. aside from that, Vince wound up with everything, which is incredible. And it's great for you guys because now it's like kind of breathes, I've heard other guys say like it breathes kind of like a second life into their career because now these kids are watching back some of this stuff and they become a fan of the $1 Million Man.
Yeah, and that's yes. I don't know. It's I don't know. It's a blessing, I guess, because to be recognized by someone who it's kind of like, I guess it'd be like me, like being a fan of some movie star that was way back and when.
Right. Right.
So
people today don't think about it, but like if you were really into a TV show in the 80s, you had to be home when that TV show was going to be on, or else you just missed it.
Yeah.
And that's it. And like they might do a replay sometime down the road, they might not. Now it's you can get your hands on anything no matter when you miss it. So it's a whole new world, and I'll tell you what, man, it's a whole new world since 40 years ago, which is how far back we're going today. We're making a return to 1983 and your time in Georgia Championship Wrestling, which now had been apparently renamed to World Championship Wrestling. And we're covering October and November of 83 this week, and it takes you from Japan back to Georgia and some really big matches. So I'm excited to continue this story, Ted. We started with you in Mid-South in 83, and now you're in the Georgia territory. As we discussed on the last episode, you got yourself suspended after a vicious attack on Tommy Rich in the Omni in September, but you've got big plans in mind. Let's have a look at our first clip this week.
Championship Wrestling. First you find me. Now you suspend me for 5 weeks, thinking that it's going to put a cramp in my style. Well, let me tell you something. I'm a man in championship wrestling, in a wrestling world that can go any place I want to go. With my ability, I'm wanted all over the world, and I have an open contract right now to go to Japan. So I'll just go to Japan for 5 weeks, but I'll be back. And when I come back, I'm going to pick up right where I left off. I told you people that I was going to hurt Tommy Rich, and that's exactly what I did. I do what I say I'm going to do, and I've got another man in mind when I get back. And when I come back, I'll hurt him too. If it has to be in the confines of that ring and to keep myself from being suspended further, then that I can do. I am the greatest scientific wrestler you've ever seen. But the difference in Ted DiBiase now, as I told you people before, is that I don't care about being Mr. Nice Guy. Whatever it takes, anything it takes to win, to put that money in the palm of my hand is exactly what I'm going to do. Where is Tommy Rich right now? He's laid out somewhere wondering what happened to him because he's a nice guy. Well, this is not a nice guy anymore. You're looking at a champion. You're looking at a winner. And when I come back, people, I'm coming back to stay. And oh yes, naturally, I'm number one, and I'm going to be number one here and everywhere that you can see this face on World Championship Wrestling. So I'll take my suspension. I'll go to Japan. I'll go wherever else they want me because I am in big demand. And when I come back, I'll be back to stay.
Ted, that was a hell of a promo, man.
Wow, man. Yeah. Gosh, I was getting mad. No.
And those sunglasses you had on, like it was a really cool look, like very kind of a Ric Flair thing going on.
Yeah.
And plus like that smug kind of attitude that you had and that look on your face. I mean, you were selling it really great. And the promo, by the way, it was very like Jake Roberts-esque in that you weren't doing any shouting. You weren't very loud on the mic. It was almost like, again, we had to like sort of lean in to hear what you had to say. When in your career do you think that you really started to dial in your ability on the microphone, Ted?
I really couldn't say, Marcus. I just, I don't know. It was one of those things. It's like, I remember that when I first started wrestling, that I wasn't, obviously I was on the opening match and I wasn't doing interviews, but I went to the TV station I think back then, this was when in Shreveport at the TV station. And because all the guys I can't remember what day of the week it was. Well, yeah, I think it was Wednesday. Here's the deal. We would wrestle in Shreveport on Tuesday night. Wednesday morning, they would do their interviews for that week at the TV station, and Dick Murdoch and Killer Carl Cox, and those were the highliners at the time. And then we would drive from Shreveport 200 miles to Jackson, Mississippi, where I live now, and have a show. But on Wednesday morning, they would do the interviews. But every Wednesday, I didn't have to be up, and I didn't have to go down there, but I would go down to the TV station, and I knew what the angles were, and I paid attention, and I just listened. I listened to the guys that were really good on the mic, and I just tried to glean from them, and gradually that's how I got it. So.
But, the other thing that's really interesting is that you had this really very unique promo style that was all yours whenever you got to the WWF. And so, but however, it's different from that promo that you just delivered here in Georgia, and you were a heel in both territories. So it's really fascinating how kind of versatile you would go on to be when it came to delivering your promos. Were you delivering promos like in front of a mirror to practice, or were you more just like absorbing and then you just go out there and give it your best shot?
Marcus, back then, brother, I knew what the program was, and I would have an idea, but I never. It wasn't until much later when the WWF became the WWE, and they would give you scripted stuff, and I told them even then, I said, you can give me this, but I'm not going to say what's on this thing word for word. I'm going to take the idea that I see is being expressed here, and I'm going to do it my way. Because if I don't do it my way, then it's not going to sound like me. And that's what I did. And they let me do it, because they know I could.
Man, nowadays everything, from what I hear, I'm obviously not behind the scenes in WWE, but from what I hear, everything is scripted, and you have to hit all these points, and it's like, we hear that back in like even the late 90s, it was more like bullet points. They'd say like, hey, we want you to go out there and say something to this effect, and they go out there and do it. But now apparently it's you're kind of more of a soap opera actor than you are a wrestler sometimes.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'd be able to do it.
No. And I'm not gonna knock it. I mean, that's the other thing. I was like, I don't. I guess I'm old school because I was raised old school, and that's how it worked for me. And and I'm not Vince McMahon, and I don't know all that Vince McMahon knows. And who knows? Maybe there's a reason now. For them to follow a script, but I just never had to.
As we mentioned last time we discussed 1983, you are off to Japan to compete in the Giant Series, and they're going to work your ass off when you're over there in singles and tag team matches. While you're there, you're going to work with the likes of Tenryu, Giant Baba, Akiya Sato, and the Great Kabuki, among others. Ted, what can you tell us about dealing with the language barrier when you're in the ring with a Japanese opponent?
You know what? There really wasn't a language barrier in the ring, because a lot of the Japanese wrestlers, especially the ones that became big stars, when like Giant Baba had the Funk family, basically Dory Jr. and Terry, and I guess Dory Sr. when he was still alive. And I don't know how they developed their relationship with Japan, but a lot of the young Japanese wrestlers would come over and spend time in the United States and in the Amarillo territory.
Ah, okay.
And would start there. And so, it was kind of like the basic wrestling language they knew in English, you know. So, and it's kind of like, you know, one tackle, drop down, get it again, you know, which basically, if I had a headlock on a guy and I said one tackle, drop down, get it again, or if he had the headlock on me, which means I'm going to shoot him off, he's going to hit me with a tackle, he's going to hit the ropes again, I'm going to drop down, and then when I stand up and turn around, he's going to grab the headlock again and take me over. One tackle, drop down, get it again.
Ah, okay.
So, you know, they learned the English language in terms of, you know, calling wrestling moves. So,
Well, I'm sure that makes life a lot easier. However, life over there doesn't seem like it's especially easy because you guys are traveling all over the place. You're there for about a month. You have very few days off. I was looking at your full schedule while you're over there, and I want to give a shout out real quick to John Alred. I mentioned him the last time we were talking about this. I want to shout out to him again because he helped me to locate some of this added information, which is really hard to find, especially, you know, from Japan at this time, and certainly even from Georgia at this time. But I wound up seeing. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, but to your point, here's the difference though in Japan.
All right.
Yeah, in the United States, I've got to get myself to all these places.
Okay.
With the exception of like when you know, when I started going to St. Louis, and St. Louis it's another old story about the influence of the St. It's kind of like if you went to St. Louis and you got over there in St. Louis, people were going to hear about you all over the country. And that's one of the things that helped me, you know, but Japan, we didn't have to worry about anything but getting in the ring and having a match because everything else was taken care of. Our hotels were taken care of. All our transportation. I mean, they actually, we all got on a tour bus, you know, and you know, and maybe two tour buses, one for us and, you know, one for the other, you know, for the Japanese guys. But and so we never had to worry about, you know, all we had to do every day is we would look on the board, and they would have a time. And when we read the time, that meant kind of like, as it said 10 o'clock, that means we're leaving at 10 o'clock on the bus the next day. And so,
Okay.
yeah, and they, you know, everything else was taken care of. And the only thing that we had to pay for in Japan was our food. So,
You know, and the other thing I'm seeing in my research, and I'm glad you brought up the bus because, you know, I'd seen some stuff about, you know, the bus, and I was like, okay, I wonder what that experience was like as far as getting on a bus with a bunch of guys, and Japanese guys at that. Like, I wonder if it was fun. But here, what I saw was that during this tour, you're out there with the likes of Hanson and Brody, and Harley Race is going to be part of this tour at one point as well. So,
yeah.
I mean, is it kind of a weird question because, you know, you're traveling, it's work, but like, is it fun? Because it seems like being on the bus with a bunch of guys playing cards, drinking would actually be like a blast.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's one. You know, I didn't get into the card game so much, but a lot of them did. I mean, that's how they passed the time. You know, I'd get a book and read or something, but and, you know, and every day was different. You know, and some of the longer trips, instead of, you know, taking the bus, they would take us. We would just get in the bus and go to the train station. Now, I want to tell you something. You talk about a country that's got, I mean, they have what they call the bullet train, and this train goes, it goes 100 miles an hour, or more, and you know, so and occasionally, like if we went to another, obviously, there's Japan is several islands, you know, the main island, you know, and then the one up north is called Hokkaido, and then I'm trying to think a couple of the other ones, but yeah.
So you would have to travel by boat occasionally then to get out to these other islands?
No, we would fly.
Ah, okay. This is like a little puddle jumper type plane.
Well, yeah, or you know, yeah, no, commercial plane, you know,
Really?
yeah.
Wow. Man, I mean, they pull out all the stops to make sure that you guys were comfortable and at home there. It sounds like a really kind of a great experience.
It was. It really was. But you work. The wrestling was. Kind of, some of the guys call it kind of like it was like it was stiffer. Yeah, yeah. It's like if you chopped a guy, man, you chopped him.
Yeah.
So it was snug. It was, I guess, but I mean, it wasn't. It was like there was never anybody that I wrestled with and went, oh gosh, I don't want to work with this guy. He's terrible. They were all good.
I've heard you talk about Jumbo a little bit before, and certainly we've talked about Baba and how well he treated you, especially as your career was winding down and coming to an end. Did you ever become buddies with any of the other guys like Tenryu, Sato, or Kabuki?
I mean, I know, I knew all those guys. I mean, and we were all, there was nobody I didn't, like nobody like that I didn't like, and I seemingly got along with everybody, and so did most of the guys over there.
Another big happening during this tour of Japan is that you're set to work with Jerry Lawler while you're there on 10/14 with the vacant NWA United National title on the line. Lawler would forfeit the match, and you'd be named the champion. Any memory of why Lawler would forfeit that match?
No. The only reason I could think of is that he didn't want to put me over, which I don't know. Maybe I wasn't like a big enough star at the time for him to do a job for. So,
But
but
you're
I
not
don't.
exactly close to Memphis at this time. Why is he worried about putting somebody?
Yeah, yeah. I guess because maybe news from Japan would travel. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, and I mean, here you are. You work for the NWA, but you're in Japan, and you're becoming an NWA United National title, which I believe is a title that was exclusive to Japan.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that this is happening. Even more interesting that Lawler might not want to put you over. But did you ever get a chance to work with Jerry over the course of your career?
I never did work. I never worked with Lawler. I never did. And
Wow.
and later, we never had I never had a discussion with him about that. I mean, I just forgot about it. I mean, I don't know. Different guys, have different reasons for leaving the country. I don't know, but I can't. I mean, did he leave, or did
So
he just not come to Japan?
all I had in the notes was that he forfeited. So, like, in my head, that means he's there and he doesn't do the match, refuses to do it. However, I could be wrong. Maybe he just didn't make it overseas. Maybe he didn't want to come
Well,
overseas.
I never remember him even being there.
Okay. So
So
maybe he never made it. Who knows?
yeah,
Interesting you never worked with him though, because you guys are two guys kind of running parallel. He's considered a great worker, certainly in his territory, and you've been great everywhere you've gone. So it's fascinating to me that you
and I
guys never
understand
crossed
that
paths,
Jerry, he spent most of his time in Memphis,
and you never got a chance there.
and I never went there. And it's like that's funny because it's just 200 miles north of me. It's like um and I just I don't know. I just kept going back to work for Bill.
So on Halloween night, 1983, which we're recording this on Halloween, so this is 40 years ago as we're recording this today. You challenge Harley Race for his NWA World Title and lose while you're over there in Japan. We've talked about your history with Harley on the show a bunch, but never really what your experiences were like working with him in the ring. What was it like to step into the ring with the legendary Harley Race?
For me, it was awesome. I mean, because the relationship I had with Harley went way back. Harley's a man who tried to save my father's life the night he died. And then I remember when I first started wrestling, and it was the summer of '75. Well, but that's when I was working for Bill Watts. Well, then after a year, I went back to Amarillo, and now I was working the Amarillo territory. And I think this is while Harley was champion. And I remember in a conversation we had, he just told me, he says, kid, he says, he said, if I have anything to do with it, one day this belt will be around your waist.
Wow.
And he had that much confidence in me.
I wanted to ask you too, Ted. Harley he's one of those guys that anytime you ask a wrestler about Harley Race, they say like, "Oh, I love the guy. One of my favorite wrestlers, kind of like the ultimate pro wrestler."
Yeah.
They don't really talk about his ring skills though. They use words like believable and tough and stuff like that. When it came to Harley's ring skills, what did you think about that?
Oh gosh, I mean, yeah, I mean he could do it. And the thing is, it's everybody's got their own style, and it was I wrestled Harley more than once as when he was champion, and one of the places that I wrestled him, like I said, and wrestled him to a 1 hour draw, and an hour wrestling match. I mean, you got to time everything. And so anyway, he was the boss. I got in there and listened to everything he said, but that was like putting me over. I mean, I was making a name for myself, but for a young guy like me to be given an opportunity, and I think I know what it was. We had a match. We had a tag team match. It was me and I can't remember who my partner was now. I think it was a guy named Bulldog Bob Brown.
Okay.
Might have been. But anyway, we had a tag team match against Harley and somebody else. Anyway, and so in the tag team match, I pin Harley. Wow. I get a 3 count on Harley on television in this tag team match.
That's a big deal.
And the announcer even got all excited and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a new world champion." And then had to correct himself. He said, "I'm sorry, but we don't have a new world champion because this is a tag team match." But Harley Race, who is a world champion, has been pinned by Ted DiBiase. Well, that was a setup for us to wrestle in St. Louis at the Kiel Auditorium, which is the big auditorium there. And wrestling, St. Louis is just one of those hubs. It was one of those places where the wrestlers that came there, they came from all over the territories. Mm-hmm. I mean, there'd be a couple guys. I mean, I remember, I don't know, a couple guys that were wrestling for Vern Gagne. I can't remember right now who it was, but they would come down and it was like a melting pot, but it's hard to describe St. Louis wrestling, but anyway.
Man, historic for you, a young guy, to have a guy like Harley Race putting you over. Like, man, it's I hope our audience understands what a big deal that is.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a minute to discuss our fantastic sponsor that is changing the lives of men everywhere. Of course, we are talking about Blue Chew. Are you ready to perform with the confidence of the $1 million man in the bedroom? Are you ready to leave your partner feeling like $1 million? Are you ready to get that thing so hard you could go hunting with it? If the answer to all those questions is yes, it's time for you to give Blue Chew a try. Blue Chew can help increase your performance and regain that old confidence where it counts the very most. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable tablets and at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night, so that you can plan ahead or be ready when that opportunity springs up. The process is simple. Sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. the best part of it, it's all done online. You can forget about those visits to the doctor's office, no more weird, awkward, uncomfortable conversations, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy anymore. It comes right to you. Blue Chew's tablets are made right here in the USA and prepared and shipped direct to your door in a discreet package. But you know the drill, guys. There's not going to be anything discreet about your package. Men everywhere have never been more excited to see their mail carrier arrive, because when your package arrives, your package arrives. Listen, I know what your next question is. Will it actually work? Why don't you try it for free and find out for yourself? Something free from the $1 Million Man? That's right. You can try it right now for free. All you have to do is pay $5 shipping. That's it. Place your order now and give your partner a very pleasant surprise. Women are attracted to confidence, and Blue Chew can help give you confidence where it counts. Don't wait any longer. Time to chew it and do it. Take advantage of our special deal. Again, you can try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code EGAP at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com, promo code EGAP, and receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information, and we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring Everybody's Got a Pod. Let's get back to the States and Georgia Championship Wrestling. After leaving Japan as the NWA United National Champ, you'd return and immediately target Tommy Rich, and actually you'd be replacing Harley Race to face Rich in the Omni on November 6th, where you would be disqualified in the match. That match, as far as I could tell, would not be mentioned on TV, however. So instead, your TV return would happen under more unique circumstances on November 11th in Macon. Let's have a look at that.
I want to mention here right now that we also have a very piece of film that was taken by somebody and sent to us here in a situation that just happened concerning Tommy Rich. Somebody is after Tommy Rich. We've got the clip that was sent to us, and we thought this would be the time to show it and just let the people see right away. We don't know who, but I think the film clip is self-explanatory.
I think it is indeed. Let's go to that right now. Mask and Tommy Rich caught totally unawares in a full power slam. It's difficult to determine because the person is wearing street clothes, but it's not difficult to figure out that he's an extremely powerful individual.
Well, as you know, Tommy has been going after the world's title. Tommy has been going with a partner after the tag team titles held by the Road Warriors. And Tommy is certainly to be considered and reckoned with. Here we have a man that comes into the ring at a match, not scheduled, don't know who he is, with a mask. And Tommy, at this point, as we can see, is trying to take that mask off. But the film will stop here in just a moment, and we still won't know who he is.
The interesting thing, too, and may I just suggest this to all of you who may be watching, don't ever jump into a ring, because, my friend, you're putting yourself in great jeopardy, as this man, whoever he was, has put himself into. I have a hunch, however, that he is a professional competitor.
I'm sure of it, but the thing is, the important point is, as Tommy said, he was unsuccessful in his attempt to hurt Tommy, because if you take a look right now, you'll see who's in that ring.
All right. That masked man looked pretty familiar, doing some familiar things in there with the power slam and the fist drop.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as we would know, your feud with Tommy Rich would kind of culminate when Rich would actually, I believe, he would be suspended by Georgia, and he would come back as the masked Mr. R. So, so this is kind of like a fun.
What was great about that is, we do the thing with me having the mask on and who is it. And finally, everybody finds out.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, when we have this match and the losers leaves town or something, and everybody obviously is expecting Tommy to win, and he doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
I win, and then this Mr. R shows up, and everybody just goes wild because everybody knows that it's Tommy Rich. I mean, he's got a mask on, but his blonde hair is hanging out underneath the mask, and we had fun with that because I'm screaming and complaining. I said, "It's Tommy Rich! It's Tommy Rich!"
Some turnabout is fair play, and man, just such fun stuff. And yeah, I believe it was a loser leaves town. It wasn't a suspension for Tommy Rich, but man, just such a cool angle. And yeah, just a really fun way to kind of bring you back after your tour of Japan there. Do you have any recollection?
and it was a pleasure working with Tommy because he was so easy. I mean,
Yeah.
he was one of those guys. He was just a natural. And my gosh, I mean, he was so over in Georgia. Oh my gosh. Everybody loved Tommy.
Man, to say that he became a top guy in that region is an understatement. He was super, super over at this time, and you can see it on the TV. So I mean, they need to put him with a strong heel. And brother, it was you. We saw it in that promo earlier. We're gonna see another one before this thing is over. And yeah, it's you were bringing the heat. And well, look, another crew of guys that's bringing the heat is Paul Ellering, Jake Roberts, and the Road Warriors, who will form the original Legion of Doom in Georgia at this time. Ted, Paul Ellering, not a guy that's likely to come up often on our show here. Did you have much experience with him, and what did you think of his work?
Man, I liked Paul. I mean, he was in the manager role. He was great. And he was managing, correct?
Yes. So I think that he would still be active at times in the ring during this era, but I think for the most part, his active ring time was over. He was just
And for whatever reason, I know he had wrestled, but I think I don't think I can't personally remember having a match with Paul, but I know I dealt with him when he was in the manager role. So.
And he was in phenomenal shape himself. If you look at a picture of a young
Oh
Paul
gosh,
Ellering, just
yeah.
absolutely jacked.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
want to say that he had suffered some kind of an injury, and he was now kind of pretty much a full-time manager.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see guys like Jake and the Road Warriors, and I know that Nikita Koloff was living with those guys. It was like this house of just these crazy guys, the Road Warriors and Jake and Nikita all living together while they're there in Georgia. I know that at the time, Ted, you're a married man. However, it's like you're still a young man. And these guys are out, partying and having a hell of a time as a bunch of young single guys. I mean, during this time, is it like you're going to work and just going home, or are you like hanging out with the guys, coming over to the house, traveling with them?
No, I was a married guy. I went home, and that's the other thing about Georgia is the thing I loved about Georgia was there were a few exceptions, but basically I went home every night. And like when I was working in Mid-South, that wasn't the case. There was, and or Amarillo, name a territory. There's a lot of times when, you're spending 2 or 3 days on the road, or staying over somewhere. But Georgia is one of those places where, I mean, all the shots were relatively short, and you could, like Columbus, Georgia, that was a regular show, and it was like 100 miles away. Macon, Georgia, it was like 50 miles south of Atlanta. Yeah, I mean, that was one of those places where I could go home every night. So yeah, I didn't do a lot of partying there.
I can see where that would be great for you and your mental state, but also great for your relationship. If you're home every night or almost every night, like, man, that's a good thing. I know my wife would be
Yeah,
happy.
and there were. I know that they started. We started going. Like we would fly. We would do the TV in Atlanta on Saturday morning, and then go to the airport and fly to Columbus, Ohio. And we worked Columbus, and eventually, we'd work Columbus and maybe one other place, and then right back to Atlanta. It was crazy, but then they tried that. Then we would do it. I remember it eventually evolved into going into Columbus after TV, working Columbus, and then we would do a tour up in that area of Columbus, Ohio, and whatever. And then like on Friday night, or crazy, everybody would go back to Columbus, and we would get on the earliest flight out of Columbus on Saturday morning, and we would fly back into the Atlanta airport and get in our cars and go straight to the TV station.
You know,
Crazy.
funny that you should bring up Columbus and making the tour of Cleveland because or of Ohio, because that's what we've got to talk about next. On November 18th, you'd have a really, really busy night in Cleveland, Ohio. First, you'd take on and defeat Ronnie Garvin. Ronnie was in an absolutely unforgettable feud with Jake Roberts at this time, and Ronnie is going to be a special guest on my other podcast, The Snake Pit with Jake Roberts, so that the two of them can discuss their rivalry 40 years ago. I'm actually talking to him here in like 7 days. So Ted, what can you tell us about working with Ronnie Garvin?
Oh, it was so easy. Ronnie was great. He really was. And just a real good guy too. No complaints. It's kind of like, it was like working with Ronnie was like almost like having a night off.
Really?
I mean, and working with Jake, again, because I believe all of us came from the same, we looked at wrestling the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like what the business is about, how, everything. Yeah, he was, easy.
Man, and the guy was in phenomenal condition. It's funny talking to Jake about Ronnie, and actually, whenever I spoke to Ronnie on the phone to get set up with him to come on my podcast with Jake, one of the first things he said was like, "Man, Jake and I had some very, very physical battles," and Jake would say like, "Man, getting in the ring with Ronnie was like half a shoot." He was like, "I loved working with him, but like we would beat the shit out of each other." And Ronnie confirmed that.
Yeah.
Was he pretty rough with you in there too?
Oh, I mean, no, I mean, that was just, we accepted that fact. Yeah, always snug. If you're going to get a chap, everybody in the building's going to hear it. Wow.
Well, Ronnie would go on to become the NWA World Champion in 1987. At the time, did you see that kind of potential in him?
Yeah, I did.
Just his ring work, his look, all of it, the full package.
Yeah.
The same night that you defeated Ronnie Garvin in Cleveland, you'd go on to win another match, and this time it's against Brett Sawyer for his NWA National Heavyweight title. It's a big win here, Ted, and a prestigious belt, a belt that's actually still in use today with Billy Corgan's NWA. Do you have any memory of working with Brett Sawyer?
Not a lot. I mean, he was a good worker. I remember that. He was good. It wasn't like, pulling hairs with somebody or having to tell somebody what to do step by step by step by step. We went in and did it. And then he was a great worker.
Now, his brother, of course, is Buzz Sawyer, and Buzz would probably go on to be the bigger name of the two. How would you compare their ring work? Did you like working more with Buzz or with Brett?
Gosh, I'll be honest with you, I can't remember.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't work with those guys that much.
Okay.
So
I know that we'll be talking about it next time we cover Georgia. Coming up soon, you're going to be defending that national heavyweight championship against Buzz Sawyer. So we'll watch back the match and talk about it. But I don't know. I know that Buzz gets a lot of flack for the kind of man he was outside the ring. But from what I've seen, anytime I see any of his work, I'm like, yeah, dude, he's pretty good.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I would probably agree about with him getting a lot of flack about how he was out of the ring. But in the ring, he was, it was all business.
I'm asking you to reach back 40 years, but on a night like this where you'd work twice, is it safe to assume that they'd have to cut you a larger check because you're out there busting your butt in 2 matches?
I'm sorry, but that's laughable.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it might be like, it might show up on your check like you got this much for this town, and then you got this much for this town, and I don't know, but I mean, promoters, it's more like what did you make weekly, and it wasn't. It was almost They were different every week, but not a lot of difference. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
You could average them out and go, basically, I'm making this much a week.
I gotcha. I
You know,
see. So you would just get, it's not like at the end of the night they're writing you a check. It would be like a week or two, a couple weeks later, you get a Cleveland check, and it would say like, here's what you made in Cleveland, and they're not taking
you
into
get a
account.
check. You get a check. I don't know. I can't remember how they pay this in Georgia. If we got paid weekly or biweekly, but it would be you'd have the towns listed there and how much you made in each one.
I gotcha. All right. Well, on paper, you should have made more. Following your victory, you'd have some things to say on TV to Gordon Soley, and let's drop in on that and have a look at the new national heavyweight champion.
Right, Gordon Soley, as everyone knows in the game of professional wrestling, it's getting to the top. And at the very top, the pedestal of professional wrestling is the world heavyweight title. But along the way, Gordon Soley, you have to win titles along the way to attain and get the shot at that top one. It's the only one, I might add you, that has evaded Ted DiBiase. I have been the North American champion 4 times. I am the national heavyweight champion now. I beat the present world heavyweight champion, Ric Flair, for the Missouri title before he ever dreamed of becoming the world champion. I hold that victory over him. Ric Flair, start looking over your shoulder. I told you, Gordon Soley, and I told all you people when I came back to world champion wrestling why I was back. And I attained the first goal. I'm a doer, not just a talker. I hear all these people talking about what they're going to do to who. I'm a doer. And I've gone out and I've done it. Ric Flair, get ready.
All right. So you just won this national heavyweight championship, but you're kind of positioning it like, yep, I've got this, but it's really more of a stepping stone. I'm trying to get to Ric Flair and that 10 pounds of gold. You've said before that you didn't win the NWA World's title because, as you mentioned, you're kind of back and forth with Watts.
Yeah.
Do you believe, though, that if you hadn't left here, that you would have inevitably been the NWA World Heavyweight Champion?
It's hard to say. I mean, I know it's kind of like, that's a bit of a political thing too. I know that the Funks, were, as promoters. I mean, I guess there's a gathering of all those promoters at some point, and a vote, I guess. And it's kind of like, and what's funny is like, when I remember when Terry told me, he said, and again, back to Harley, he says, he told me, he says, if I have anything to do with it, eventually one day this will be around your waist. And, Harley was a partner with Bob Geigel and I can't remember the other guy, but in Kansas City, Pat O'Connor, they were partners. The Kansas City territory was those guys. They had a vote. The Funks had a vote. Eddie Graham down in Florida had a vote. Whoever was a promoter, the promoters all got together and, based on their vote, somebody, so if I had stayed, I guess, in the NWA, territories, and I didn't, I kept going back to Bill Watts because it was good, good money. Mm-hmm. And, it's kind of, like you get word about some territories and some of the NWA territories, and if you're the world champion, you go in there and you're going to make good money because, anytime the world champion didn't show up, but maybe a couple times a year.
Yeah.
Because he keeps working the circuit.
And
the circuit is all of the NWA territories.
That brings up an interesting point, Ted. You had mentioned earlier as we were talking that Georgia was really nice because you got to be home every night.
Yeah.
Now, it kind of a weird question because of the money that's on the line. However, it's like, you've got this kind of a good position where you get to go and be with your wife every single night. The travel isn't too bad. If you had been named the NWA champion, you would have been traveling all over the United States to all the different territories. I mean, would that have been something that you would have wanted at the time?
Well, I mean, it would be worth it in terms of stature in the business.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're going to become a name that's not just somewhat regionally known, but you're going to be known everywhere.
Yes.
And you would, I think anybody, with half a brain would say, yeah, you got to do it. I mean, are you going to turn down, not to mention the money.
Yeah.
And the money. So, oh my gosh, you're the world champion. That money can set you up.
You'd have to leave the comfort of home and go take that spot if they offer it to you. Last thing about this title, because it's guys like Hulk Hogan and Jake and all of these guys consider it kind of the title. Even to this day, it's like this was the pinnacle of professional wrestling, as being the NWA champion. Do you consider not being the NWA champion kind of like a blank spot in your career, something like a regret that you never wound up getting it?
Yeah, I mean, like for all the talk and all that, all the encouragement and just what has been written and just what I know. Yeah, it's kind of like it's the one I missed. So, and I didn't miss it by much, but if what's it? Close is only good in horseshoes and hand grenades.
I know I would have liked to have seen you with the belt, and it's just I think it is one of those kind of what ifs type scenarios. We're gonna wrap up the month here. You're gonna be working with both Johnny Rich and Tommy Rich, who we're gonna be talking about more down the road. On Thanksgiving, you're gonna be back in the Omni and back in the ring with Brett Sawyer. Arn has talked often on his podcast about the importance of these holiday shows. How significant were Thanksgiving Day shows in a territory like Georgia?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, the holiday shows were always. They were always. I don't care where you were, what territory you were in. I mean, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Eve, all of those were big nights, and they're ones that you would think wouldn't be because, well, families are at home. They want to be, they want to be together as a family. Da 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 da. Well, the truth is, everybody wants to gather, and usually on Thanksgiving, you usually eat about 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock. Not 6 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with Christmas and what have you. And it's kind of like all these people who are off on these days, after they eat and unwrap the presents, they want to go do something. And so, because it used to be, those were the only days we were off. And then when they figured out that everybody wanted to go out and do something, and it could be one of your biggest money days. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I have, eaten Thanksgiving turkey and then, jumped in my car and ran to wherever we were working. Christmas Eve.
Tough on the family, but man, it got to be worth it. I have to imagine that the payoffs are better for these shows. Probably huge turnouts as well. I mean, you're working at a building like the Omni, so I'm sure you guys are jam packing the place. Speaking of the Omni, it's often referred to as the Madison Square Garden of the South. Did you view it in that light?
I don't know. I mean, not personally, but I mean, obviously it's a big venue, but I never called it.
I think you had to have grown up in that region to kind of view it like that, because I know that it's mostly guys who grew up around there that are like, oh yeah, the Omni was where it was at. I mean, you've worked in both venues, MSG and the Omni. How would you say the crowds react? Is it better in MSG or better down south with those passionate fans?
Better in in New York.
Yeah. Well, it's yeah, but from somebody who experienced both firsthand, I'll take your word on it. So Ted, that's gonna do it for this week, man. This was a blast, and again, we were talking here about 1983, but next week we're jumping ahead 5 years to 1988 and the Survivor Series, as you're gonna team up with the Twin Towers, Haku and the Red Rooster, to take on the Mega Powers, Hercules, Coco Beware, and Hillbilly Jim. So, man, that's quite a crew of guys, isn't it?
That's quite a crew. And the Red Rooster, oh my gosh.
Poor Terry Taylor.
Oh yeah. And you know what? Terry's a good friend of mine, a very good friend of mine. And Terry Taylor was one hell of a worker.
Mm-hmm.
He was really good.
Well, look, before we go, just a reminder, you've got to get over to premierstreamingnetwork.com and sign up for Premier Plus, sports, entertainment, and other shows. You guys are going to love it if you're a wrestling fan or just a fan of sports in general. I mean, some great entertainment over there. I can pretty much guarantee you're going to dig it. Again, it's premierstreamingnetwork.com. Sign up for Premier Plus. If you're enjoying our show and you're listening on your podcast app, just do us a quick favor. It only takes you a second. Like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review, because that is going to help Ted and I out a bunch. Also, we would love to interact with you on social. Follow Ted at MDM Ted DiBiase on all of his social media. Follow me at Marcus P. D'Angelo on X. Follow the podcast at Ted DiBiase Pod on every social media platform. And follow Premier Streaming Network at Watch on Premier on X and at Premier Streaming Network on Instagram and Facebook. Ted, this was a really fun episode. I love looking back to 1983. It's such a unique time in your career.
Yeah, it was. Oh, God.
Well, we'll continue looking at it here down the road, and we'll have another episode next week, right, Ted?
All right. Sounds good. And again, as I go, always remember, everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man.
We'll catch you guys next time right here on Everybody's Got a Pod.